At the far end of a quiet village, there was a wide, empty field that most people avoided. The land looked tired, just like the old wooden fence that leaned forward as if it might fall at any moment. Dry grass covered the ground, and a broken tree stood in the middle, offering little shade. This field had been forgotten by time, and so had the old black horse that lived there. The horse stood alone every day. Its body was thin, and its legs looked weak from years of standing on hard ground. Its black coat was dull and covered in dust. The horse moved slowly, not because it wanted to, but because its body no longer allowed fast steps. Its eyes were large and dark, filled with quiet sadness. Those eyes had seen many seasons pass without kindness. Long ago, the horse had worked hard. It once pulled carts, carried loads, and helped people earn their living. But when its strength faded, people stopped caring. One by one, they walked away. The horse was left behind in the field, tied to nothing and owned by no one. Food came only when someone remembered. Water came only when it rained. Villagers passed the field every day. Some turned their heads away. Some shook their heads in silence. A few whispered that the horse was too old and useless. Children were warned to stay away. Over time, the horse became part of the background, like the dry grass and broken fence. It existed, but no one truly saw it. The horse woke up each morning to the sound of wind moving through dry leaves. It lowered its head to search for grass that still held some life. When the sun grew hot, it stood near the broken tree. When the night grew cold, it curled its body inward and waited for morning. Each day felt the same. Each day passed slowly. One early morning, something different happened. A farmer named Ben walked along a narrow dirt road near the field. Ben was a simple man with rough hands and a calm face. He owned a small farm on the other side of the village. His life was not easy, but he was patient and honest. That morning, he chose a different path because the main road was muddy after the rain. As Ben walked, he noticed movement in the field. He stopped and looked closely. At first, he thought it was just a shadow. Then he saw the horse. The horse stood still, watching him. Its ears moved slightly. Its eyes met his. There was no fear, only tiredness. Ben felt his steps slow down. He had seen many animals in his life, but something about this horse pulled at his heart. He noticed the thin body, the dull coat, and the way the horse held its head low. He could tell the horse had not been cared for in a long time. Ben walked closer, careful not to scare it. The horse did not move away. That surprised him. Most animals ran from strangers. This one stayed still, as if it no longer expected anything from people. Ben stood by the fence and rested his hands on the old wood. He spoke softly, using gentle words. The horse lifted its head a little higher. Its breathing was slow and steady. Ben looked around the field. There was no food left, no water nearby, and no shelter strong enough to protect the horse from bad weather. He felt a deep ache inside his chest. He thought about walking away. Life was already hard. He had work to do and animals to feed at his own farm. But his feet would not move. His eyes stayed on the horse. The horse took one slow step forward. The fence separated them, but the space between their hearts felt smaller. Ben returned home that morning, but his mind stayed in the field. All day, while working, he thought about the old black horse. He wondered how long it had been alone. He wondered how it survived. That night, he slept poorly. The next morning, Ben filled an old bucket with clean water. He placed some hay on his cart. Without telling anyone, he walked back to the field. The horse was still there. Ben placed the bucket near the fence and stepped back. The horse looked at the water, then at Ben. After a long moment, it walked forward and drank slowly. Ben watched quietly, feeling something warm spread through his chest. For the first time in a long while, the old black horse was not alone. Ben returned to the field again the next morning. The sky was pale, and the air felt cool. He walked slowly, carrying a small sack of hay and a bucket of water. His thoughts were calm, but his heart felt heavy. He did not know why he felt so drawn to the old black horse, but something inside him refused to ignore it. The horse stood near the broken tree, just as before. When it saw Ben, it lifted its head. Its ears moved forward. That small reaction surprised Ben. It felt like the horse remembered him. Ben placed the water near the fence and set the hay on the ground. He stepped back and waited. The horse walked closer without fear. Its steps were slow, but there was purpose in them. As it ate, Ben studied its body carefully. The horse was weaker than he first thought. Its legs shook slightly, and its breathing sounded tired. Ben sighed quietly. He knew care would take time. He also knew many people would not understand his choice. Later that day, some villagers noticed Ben near the field. A man named Tom stopped and watched. Tom shook his head and walked closer. "Why do you waste your time with that horse?" Tom asked. Ben answered calmly, "It is still alive." Tom laughed softly. "It is old. It will not work. You will gain nothing." Ben looked at the horse. He did not answer right away. Then he said, "Not everything is about gain." Tom walked away, still shaking his head. Ben stayed. Over the next few days, Ben returned again and again. He brought food and water every morning and evening. He spoke gently while the horse ate. Sometimes he stood in silence. The horse grew used to his presence. It no longer watched him with empty eyes. There was awareness now. One afternoon, dark clouds filled the sky. Wind pushed through the field, bending the grass. Rain began to fall hard. Ben reached the field just in time. He saw the horse standing alone with no real shelter. That moment made his decision clear. Ben opened the old gate. The wood creaked loudly. The horse turned its head toward the sound. Ben stood still and waited. He did not pull or shout. He only opened space. Rain soaked the ground. The horse hesitated. Then it took one step. Then another. Ben walked ahead slowly, leading the way toward the dirt road. The horse followed, stopping often to rest. The walk was long and slow. Rain covered both of them. Mud clung to their feet. When they reached Ben's farm, the sun was already low. Ben guided the horse into a small barn. The barn was simple but clean. Dry hay covered the floor. Fresh water waited inside. The horse stepped in and stopped. It looked around. Its body relaxed slightly. Ben closed the door gently. That night, the horse stood under a roof. Rain no longer touched its back. Wind no longer cut through its bones. Ben sat on a wooden stool nearby. He stayed until the horse settled and rested. Ben did not sleep much that night. He kept checking the barn. Each time, the horse stood quietly. Alive. Safe. Morning came slowly. Light entered through the barn door. The horse lifted its head. Ben opened the door and smiled. The next days were hard. The horse was weak. Some mornings it refused to eat. Some days it barely moved. Ben did not rush. He cleaned the barn carefully. He brushed the horse slowly, stopping often so it would not tire. Ben learned the signs of pain and comfort. He watched the horse closely. He spoke to it as if it could understand every word. The villagers talked more now. Some were curious. Some were doubtful. A few children came close to the fence to watch. One child named Liam asked Ben why he helped the horse. Ben thought for a moment. Then he said, "Because someone should." The horse slowly began to change. It ate more. It stood longer. Its eyes followed Ben wherever he went. The black coat started to shine faintly under the dirt. Ben decided the horse needed a name. He waited until one quiet evening. The sun was setting, and light filled the barn softly. "You have walked through many shadows," Ben said quietly. "I will call you Shadow." The horse lifted its head as if listening. That night, Ben felt something he had not felt in a long time: hope. But the road ahead was still long. Days turned into weeks at Ben's farm. Life followed a quiet rhythm. Every morning, Ben woke before the sun. He washed his face, put on his old boots, and walked straight to the barn. Shadow always heard him coming. Even before Ben opened the door, the horse shifted its weight and lifted its head. Shadow was still weak, but there was a change. The emptiness in its eyes had slowly faded. There was awareness now. There was trust. Ben moved carefully around Shadow. He brushed the horse with gentle strokes, never rushing. Some days Shadow stood calmly. Other days it shifted and showed discomfort. Ben learned to stop when needed. He learned to listen without words. Food became a careful balance. Too much made Shadow tired. Too little slowed healing. Ben measured each portion and watched closely. Clean water was always nearby. Fresh hay filled the barn with a warm smell. The horse's body slowly responded. Its legs shook less. Its breathing became stronger. The black coat started to shine in places where Ben brushed every day. Villagers noticed the changes. More people began to walk past Ben's farm. They slowed down near the fence. Some whispered to each other. Others stood quietly and watched Shadow move inside the barn. One afternoon, a woman named Mara stopped with her young daughter Nina. Nina held her mother's hand and stared at the horse. Why was the horse alone before Nina asked? Mara had no answer. Ben heard the question and felt a quiet sadness. He knew Shadow had been seen many times before, but no one had stopped. As weeks passed, Shadow grew curious. It followed Ben with its eyes. When Ben left the barn, Shadow walked a few slow steps behind him. The bond between them deepened with every shared moment. One morning, Ben decided it was time for Shadow to feel the open air of the farm. He opened the barn door wide. Sunlight filled the space. Birds sang nearby. Shadow hesitated. The memory of the empty field still lived deep inside. Ben stood outside and waited. He did not pull. He did not push. He trusted Shadow to choose. After a long moment, Shadow stepped forward. The ground felt different beneath its feet. Soft grass touched its legs. Shadow stood still, breathing deeply. Ben smiled. They spent short moments outside each day. At first, only minutes. Then longer periods. Shadow walked slowly, exploring the space. The farm felt safe. There were no loud voices. No rushing feet. Only calm work and quiet care. Ben noticed Shadow's ears moving at new sounds. The horse listened to the wind. It watched other animals from a distance. It no longer held its head low. Children from the village came more often now. Ben allowed them to stand near the fence. He taught them to be gentle and quiet. Shadow remained calm. It did not show fear. Liam returned one afternoon and asked if Shadow could feel happy again. Ben looked at the horse before answering. "I think happiness grows slowly," Ben said. Healing was not always steady. Some days Shadow felt tired again. Its legs trembled after walking. Ben stayed patient. He never showed anger. He reminded himself that wounds from neglect took time to fade. One evening, heavy clouds filled the sky. Thunder rolled far away. Shadow became restless. Its body stiffened. Its eyes widened. Ben stayed close. He placed his hand gently on Shadow's neck. He spoke in a calm voice. The storm passed slowly. Shadow relaxed. That night, Ben realized something important. Shadow was not just growing stronger. It was learning to trust again. Weeks later, Ben introduced a soft rope. He let Shadow smell it. He placed it gently around the horse's neck without pulling. Shadow accepted it calmly. They walked short paths together. Ben walked beside Shadow, matching its pace. Each step felt like a victory. The village talked even more now. The horse everyone had ignored was becoming a symbol of quiet change. People spoke with softer voices when Shadow was near. One morning, Ben woke to unexpected energy. Shadow stood tall, waiting by the barn door. Its eyes were bright. Its stance was steady. Ben laughed quietly. He had not heard that sound from himself in a long time. That day, Shadow walked farther than ever before. It did not stumble. It did not stop often. The sun warmed its back. The wind moved through its dark mane. Ben felt pride, but also respect. He knew Shadow had done most of the work itself. As the sun began to set, Ben led Shadow back into the barn. He brushed the horse and whispered gentle words. Shadow stood calmly, breathing slow and deep. That night, the farm felt different. There was life in the barn. There was purpose in the quiet. Shadow lay down and rested peacefully. Ben stood nearby, knowing the hardest part was nearly over. But something new was waiting ahead. Morning light entered the barn softly. Shadow stood near the door, waiting. This had become a habit. Each day, Shadow seemed more ready, more awake, and more alive. Ben noticed the change clearly. The horse no longer stood with its head low. Its back looked straighter. Its breathing was steady and strong. Ben opened the barn door and stepped aside. Shadow walked out calmly. The grass was wet with morning dew. The air smelled fresh. Birds moved between trees, and the farm felt peaceful. Today felt different. Ben walked beside Shadow across the open field. The horse followed without hesitation. Its steps were slow but confident. There was no shaking in its legs now. Each step showed balance and strength. Ben felt proud, but he stayed calm. He knew trust could still break if pushed too fast. Villagers began to gather near the fence. They came quietly and stood together. People who once ignored the horse now watched closely. They saw how Shadow moved with grace. They saw the shine in its coat and the alert look in its eyes. A man named Paul stepped forward. He had spoken badly about the horse before. Now he looked unsure. "I never thought the horse would stand like that again," Paul said softly. Ben did not answer. He kept his focus on Shadow. Ben decided it was time to try something new. He brought out a simple saddle that had not been used in years. He placed it on the fence so Shadow could see it. He allowed the horse to smell it. Shadow stayed calm. Slowly and gently, Ben placed the saddle on Shadow's back. The horse stood still. Its ears moved, but it did not resist. Ben adjusted the straps carefully. He spoke softly the whole time. When Ben stepped back, Shadow turned its head slightly, as if asking what came next. Ben placed his foot in the stirrup and paused. He waited. Shadow did not move. With care, Ben climbed onto Shadow's back. His weight was light. He sat straight and relaxed. Shadow took one step forward. Then another. The field went silent. Shadow walked slowly across the grass. Each step was steady. Ben felt the gentle movement beneath him. His eyes filled with emotion, but he stayed calm. They walked in a wide circle. Shadow did not rush. It listened to Ben's quiet guidance. When Ben leaned forward slightly, Shadow stopped. The villagers watched in silence. Some covered their mouths. Others wiped their eyes. The old black horse that had once been forgotten was walking proudly again. Ben climbed down and patted Shadow's neck. He smiled warmly. "That is enough for today," Ben said quietly. Over the next days, Shadow practiced more. Each walk grew longer. Each movement became smoother. The horse learned to carry light loads again. It pulled a small cart slowly, then with more ease. Ben never forced Shadow. He rested often. He praised quietly. He trusted the process. Children came daily to watch. Ben taught them how to stand calmly. He showed them how to respect animals. Shadow stayed gentle and patient. One afternoon, A small girl named Ella reached out slowly. Ben nodded. Ella touched Shadow's neck softly. The horse did not move away. It closed its eyes for a moment. Ella smiled brightly. Shadow had become part of the village. The farm also changed. Work felt lighter. Days felt fuller. Ben noticed he laughed more often. His worries felt smaller. One evening, Ben sat on the fence and watched Shadow move freely in the field. The horse ran slowly, then faster. Its dark mane moved with the wind. Its body looked strong and free. Ben remembered the first day he saw Shadow standing alone in the empty field. The memory felt distant now. Shadow stopped near Ben and lowered its head. Ben rested his hand on the horse's neck. The connection between them felt deep and unbreakable. That night, the village gathered near the farm. They brought food and lanterns. It was not planned. It simply happened. People shared quiet words. They spoke about change. They spoke about care. They spoke about seeing what had once been ignored. Shadow stood calmly among them. No fear lived in its eyes anymore. Ben looked around and felt something powerful. One act of kindness had reached many hearts. As the night ended, Ben led Shadow back into the barn. He brushed the horse gently and gave it fresh water. Shadow stood quietly, relaxed and content. Ben whispered softly, "You are strong now." Shadow lifted its head as if it understood. But Ben knew one more chapter still waited ahead. The morning sun rose gently over the farm. Soft light touched the fields, the barn, and the quiet road beyond the fence. Ben stood near the barn door, breathing in the fresh air. He listened to the familiar sounds of the farm waking up. Birds called from the trees. Leaves moved in the breeze. Inside the barn, Shadow stood calmly, strong and alert. Shadow no longer waited with fear or weakness. The horse stood tall and steady, its black coat shining under the light. Its eyes were clear and full of life. Each movement showed confidence that had once been lost. Ben opened the barn door wide. Shadow stepped outside without hesitation. The ground felt familiar and safe beneath its feet. Ben walked beside the horse, not leading and not following, but sharing the path. Today marked a full season since Shadow arrived at the farm. Ben remembered the broken fence, the empty field, and the silent eyes that once looked at him with no hope. That memory felt distant now, like a shadow that no longer followed. The village gathered later that day. It had become a habit. People no longer came to doubt. They came to admire. They came to learn. Children ran near the fence, laughing softly. Parents watched with calm smiles. Shadow moved slowly among them, gentle and patient. The horse had become a symbol of care and quiet strength. Ben prepared a small walk through the village. It was not a show. It was simply a shared moment. Shadow wore the saddle comfortably. Ben walked beside the horse, holding the rope loosely. They moved down the familiar road. Houses lined the path. Doors opened. People stepped outside. Some waved. Some stood quietly with hands over their hearts. The old black horse that no one cared about now walked proudly through the village. An older man named Henry stepped forward. His voice was slow and thoughtful. "I remember when that horse stood alone," Henry said. "I saw it many times. I did nothing." Ben listened quietly. Henry continued, "Thank you for doing what we could not." Ben nodded gently. He did not seek praise. He believed kindness was not something to be rewarded. It was something to be shared. Shadow stopped near the edge of the village where the old field once lay. The fence was repaired now. Fresh grass grew tall and green. The broken tree had been cleared, and new plants stood nearby. Shadow looked at the land calmly. There was no fear, no sadness, only peace. Ben led Shadow back to the farm as the sun lowered. The sky turned warm and golden. The day felt complete. Life settled into a steady rhythm after that. Shadow helped with light farm work. The horse pulled small carts and walked long paths with ease. Ben always watched carefully, always rested Shadow when needed. The bond between them deepened with every shared day. Ben also changed. He felt lighter. His nights were restful. His mornings felt full of purpose. The farm no longer felt like a place of work alone. It felt like a home filled with meaning. One quiet evening, Ben sat near the barn as Shadow grazed nearby. The stars appeared slowly above them. The world felt calm and still. Ben spoke softly. "You were never useless." Shadow lifted its head and walked closer. The horse stood beside Ben, close enough to feel warmth and comfort. The village continued to grow kinder. People looked more carefully at the world around them. They helped more. They ignored less. Children learned the lesson without words. They saw what patience and care could do. Seasons changed again. Rain came and passed. The sun returned. Through it all, Shadow remained strong. 1 year later, the village held a simple gathering at the farm. Lanterns lit the evening. Food was shared. Stories were told. Shadow stood quietly among the people, calm and proud. Ben looked around and felt something deep and steady inside his chest. He knew the story of the old black horse would be told for years. Not as a story of weakness, but as a story of renewal. A life once forgotten had been given meaning again. And it all began when one farmer chose to care.